All right, it's time to build another bike. This is the Noli Delirium. It's gonna be 200 mil travel in the front, 190 mil in the rear, a mullet park bike setup. I'm super excited to have a downhill bike again, and I really wanted to just give this bike and the parts box to the shop to build, but for some reason, you guys like watching me suffer while I build a bike, so we're gonna do that again. This could be like the world's longest bike check, kind of. This time though, I'm not gonna make any mistakes, and it's all just gonna come together all very smoothly. Okay, let's build this bike. All right, I've already done a few things off camera. I hammered on the crown race onto the fork, went to Kinetic Cycles to do that. I also went and got the right spring for the coil I'm gonna put on. This is the Bomber CR, and yeah, I needed a 600-pound coil for this build. It was oddly hard to find a coil that fit. I mean, it's all made by Fox, so you think that Fox coils would fit, but I tried the 550 and it's slightly too long. I tried the 650 and it was slightly too long, both 600 by 2.8. So this is a 600 by 2.55, and even this was slightly too long, and I had to take, well, I got the guys at Kinetic, thankfully, to come to the rescue and compress the coil a bit by using zip ties so we could slide it on and yeah, get it going. Very odd that Fox makes both of these things, and yeah, they don't seem to fit together. Not sure what's going on there. But we'll press in the headset cups now and thread in the bottom bracket, and let's get started. And so of course, we're going to grease things up. Going to just paint on some happy little grease trees. I actually usually get the shop or Noli to press in the headset cups. I don't think I've actually done it on a build before, but I've got it pressed, so I figured I could just do it. We'll find out. Going to apply some grease to the frame, but also the actual cups. Just want to make sure everything's nice and greased up so it won't creak or anything, and so it goes in smoothly too. All right, of course I've got a bearing press, but it doesn't have a big enough, what do you call it, part that presses that actually fits over the lower cup. So either I need to go find something, or we're going to the shop already made a mistake, didn't get the right parts. Off to a rough start. All right, let's try something a little bit easier. Let's put in the bottom bracket. Again, going to paint on some grease. No accidents here, just happy little greasy mistakes. Nolis all have threaded bottom brackets, and I am a big fan of the threaded bottom bracket. The press-in bottom bracket is just nonsense, and especially on a carbon frame, I hate press-in bottom brackets. There, we greased up the frame. We're just gonna add a little extra grease too to the threads. Really just going to town on the grease. All right, just going to thread this in mostly by hand. So I can mostly get the bottom bracket in by hand, but I can't apply 50 Newton meters of torque with my fingers. And that's another thing about Noli frames. I think a lot of people think that only carbon frames are good these days, like a high quality bike should be made of carbon. And that's kind of true, that a lot of good frames are made from carbon. And what ends up happening is a company will design the bike around being carbon. They'll make the fanciest version out of carbon, and then they'll have an aluminum version, which is kind of an afterthought, and they'll use like a cheaper grade aluminum to offer kind of like a lower cost version of the bike. So then people associate like lower, cheaper cost bikes with aluminum frames. In the case of Noli, they're just using a much higher grade aluminum that, yeah, is at least on par with carbon frames. And in my case, as you guys know, I would break a lot of frames. Pretty much every, like 85% of the carbon bikes I had, I broke within a year, sometimes multiple times a year. And that just hasn't been a problem with my Nolis. So, big fan of high quality aluminum frames. And it's even things like being able to thread the bottom bracket in by hand all the way, and there's no burrs or anything like that. The tolerances are all just right, threads in smooth, and yeah, it's that kind of stuff that you notice on these high quality frames compared to, you know, maybe a brand that's making an aluminum frame for as low of cost as possible. And That's why a Noli aluminum frame will be more expensive than, say, another brand's aluminum frame. They're just putting a lot of effort into making a high quality bike. All right, we're gonna ballpark 50 Newton meters here. All right, I'm just going to grease the interface too, and make sure this doesn't creak. Kind of just savagely tossed grease on here, but that's okay. We'll wipe down all the excess once we get it together. I got a 32 tooth 5-dev chainring for this. In hindsight, I would have gone, I think, with a 34. Now I'm not gonna put this on backwards like I did last time. So let's thread that on. I think that is this Can Zinc edition cranks. Something like that. Now for a tale as old as time, I always forget, big spacer non-drive side? Big spacer drive side. I think big spacer non-drive side. And of course we're just gonna grease it all up. Don't you want to be in your home? These tiny O-rings that are on the dub bottom brackets, they never stay in that little like crevasse that they're supposed to stay in. And so you they just fall out. You try and put it in, it doesn't stick in there, it just falls out. All right, we've got the drive side on. You can toss the non-drive side on now. Oh yeah, these are 155 mil cranks. Definitely on the short end, but this bike is not going to see a lot of pedaling. And so, although I prefer on the Fugitive, which I do a lot of pedaling on, I like to do 175 mil cranks, just long boys. On the downhill bike, yeah, we're going short, 155. I realized I have some sort of chain guide deal to put on. Now I'm wondering if you need to do that before you put the cranks on. Okay, you do need to put this on before you put the cranks on. 2 mistakes, that's it though. 2 mistakes. Oh, okay, we're off to a bad start. 2 immediate mistakes, but after this, no more mistakes. Okay, I'm just gonna take the cranks off and put this on. Then put the cranks on. Well, I did just hammer. Not literally hammer, but use much strength to cram this crank on. And I gotta take it off. All right, this comes with a bunch of different spacers. And now I'm not exactly sure where this will line up. All right, here's the plan. I'm just going to put these together and then we will put the bolts and spacers in after so that I can line them up. And then the sprocket will fit in the center of kind of where this chain guide is supposed to go. All right, as I suspected, you do need a decent amount of spacers to bring the chain guide out a bit. All right, so I was right. It is kind of an odd combination. You've got to do, of course, little washer on the bolt. You got to do a combination of big washer, little washer, so that it lines up right. So, all right, let's just toss this on and get the cranks back on. All right, we've got the MRP chain guide and I guess lower guide on here. What I really like about this one is it's got kind of this swooping lower guide bit that stops the chain from slapping up against the bottom of the chainring. I think a lot of people, when they're thinking chain noise and chain slap, they're always going on the top of the stay. But if you actually look in slow-mo when a bike is slapping around, a lot of that chain slap is coming from the bottom of the chain just slapping against the chain ring. And you can actually check, say if you're right foot forward, come over to the teeth here, check, there'll be like a tooth that is just totally worn down right around here from you standing this way and riding downhill, where the chain is just slapping and wearing it down. All right, maybe what we should do now is let's get the shock in, and then let's do the tires and the wheels. Once we do that, then I'll go press in these cups, and the bike will really come together. Once you get the fork and the wheels on, yeah, it starts to look more like a bike. And again, this is the Bomber CR coil shock. I've gone with a 600-pound spring because I am 220, ungeared, Pretty heavy. Also gone with a size S4 or large. Recently found out that I'm actually not 6 feet. I'm more like 6'1.5", and then that's without shoes on or anything. So then you get a 5'10" on, and with 5'10s on, I'm probably like 6'2" then, maybe a little taller than 6'2". So yeah, I could almost, I'd actually be curious to know what an XL feels like, but the large feels very good. I've tried sizing down again in some bikes. So this has, Nollies have a relatively low stack, not super low, but it's not a super high stack either. So I think the reach numbers look a lot longer than they are, because most people, myself included, I run the bars a little higher, so I'm going to have spacers under the stem, and that brings the reach back, especially on these really slack bikes. So I think a lot of people see like these 500 mil reach numbers on a large, and they're maybe a bit scared off until they actually ride one of the bikes, and you ride the size you're supposed to, and you go, okay, actually that does fit. And yeah, that is a problem I see with a lot of maybe legacy reviewers. They'll always size down, and then they'll always complain that the bike doesn't fit right. And it's like, you do this every time. So if you get a chance to try an Nollie out, yeah, try it in your recommended size, even if you think it's a little big, and see how that feels. Because yeah, I would say in general, the bike rides smaller than the numbers would imply, but they fit right. I've actually never ridden this coil before, like the Marzocchi. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. Marzocchi Bomber coil. I've heard they're good. They're actually just really well priced. I've got the Bomber Air on the Fugitive, and I know it's like a budget shock. Even my fork, the Z1, I know, budget fork. But yeah, I really feel no need to swap them out. Dare I say, even prefer the tune or the feel of the Z1 over the 36. Maybe not the Grip X2, like the brand new 36, but the other 36 and 38s, like up to the Grip X2. I think I actually prefer the Z1 over them. I've also found that the Z1, maybe it's just my fork in particular, but it's not creaked, even though I've ridden it for over a year now in what conditions and all that kind of stuff. Z1, totally quiet. My Zebs, my 38s, my 36s, all creak after about a year, especially riding in the wet. Nollies also have two riding positions, a slack and a not so slack. And yeah, we're just skipping right to the slack. I don't think I've ridden a bike yet that I thought was too slack. I mean, all the bikes I've ridden have all been pretty reasonable. I think my Chilcotin with the 180 mil fork is probably in the low 63 points. So it's probably like a 63.4 degree head to angle. Yeah, I would go a little slacker. I would go right to 63. I mean, this is gonna be like 62 and a half or something. It's gonna be quite slack. Whenever I'm on camera or doing something in front of anyone, the most basic tasks become impossible. Just putting the bolt in the hole. Yeah, it's so hard when people are watching. Okay, everyone close their eyes for a second while I do this. I'm also not 100% sure this is the right coil weight. I just used one of those online calculators, which are pretty good. They all gave me about the same, which is 600. Yeah, I hope I don't have to take it off, because putting it on was insane. All right, so I had to go to Kinetic again, got them to press in the cups. So they pressed in the cups, they put on the coil for me, hammered on the ground race. I think, what are we gonna do next? Crank sits on. Maybe let's put the fork on, then I'll do the tires and wheels, and we'll get a look at what this bike's gonna actually look like. All right, I've got the bearings, just gonna grease them up again. Everyone watching this video thinking, man, this guy really loves grease. Here in Vancouver, on the shore especially, people ride pretty much year-round, and so we do a lot of wet weather riding, and people are always funny. I get comments every now and then about how, like, oh, their bike never gets creaky, and yeah, I've never seen anyone be able to ride, especially an entire P&W winter, and not get a creaky bike, at least in some way, like something's gonna creak. It's just, your bike is taking like a full-on dirt bath every ride, and yeah, something's gonna creak. So what I like to do is just grease everything up as much as I can, keep the water out. That'll keep my bike quiet for as long as possible. What is crazy too is I've had bikes where, like this one where I build it up in the summer, and it doesn't really see a wet weather ride until the fall. And I always kind of forget how much riding in the wet weather beats up your bike. Like, this bike will stay dialed and silent basically until I ride it in the wet one day. And then I go, oh yeah, turns out riding in the pouring rain in the mud does. That water and dirt does get into all the little spaces. Will this just stay in here? Yes. All right, so I've got a 200 mil RockShox boxer here. I will need to go back to the shop eventually because look at that steer tube. Holy moly. Trying to, how many spacers can I fit in here? Basically, I'm gonna put this as high as I can. Should be able to go up at least 10 mil. Okay, 10 mil seems to be about the most I can get on there. I suppose you can lower? No, you can't really lower this anymore. Okay, we're just going with 10 mil then. Just give it a little tap, a tap, a tap. Just tap it in. Just tap it in. It's right at the very top of the stanchions. That's probably all right. All right, we've got a race face stem. One of these is called direct mount. Comes with these spacers that you put underneath the stem if you want to raise them up a little bit higher. And I do. I want to have a bar pretty much as high as I can get it, because I don't think you can go too high with this setup. Ever ridden a downhill bike? Yeah, it's nice having a really high front end, and you'll see that a lot right now. The World Cup guys, who is it who runs that super high front end? I want to say Dakota something or other last name. He's got like a crazy high front end, and yeah, you can go too high. I think it's definitely possible to go too high. I'd be curious to try one of those like rise reverse stems like that we saw a little while back that kind of went viral, where if you haven't seen it, it kind of like lifts the bar like way up here and puts it behind the fork, kind of more moto style. Yeah, that's like way higher than I've ever run my bars, but I am curious. I would try it. Looks crazy, obviously, but I'll probably give it a go. I've built what? A couple bikes now for you guys. I don't like building bikes. It takes me forever, and I'm just not very good at it. I kind of assumed there wasn't like an inner and outer, or like a left and a right stem. All right, here's the question. I originally bought this bar and the seat, which I'll show you after, to go on a different color of Delirium. It wasn't gonna be full raw, it was gonna be black, and then I was gonna do chrome accents, which would be sick, but now I've got a raw bike. Is this too much chromage? Chrome bar. There's silver pedals as well, and I've got Hope brakes to put on, which are also silvery chrome. Is that too much raw for one bike? I also almost always run 1-up bars, the carbon bars, and I'm trying, these are the Tidal aluminum bars in an 800. All right, I'm gonna build it up with the chrome bars, and we'll see how it looks all together, and you guys can let me know if it's just too much chrome. Let's just slide on in here. I also did a 35 mil rise bar. I would almost try, I think 1-up makes a 50 mil rise bar. Maybe if I do decide to go with a black bar, I'll do a 50 mil 1-up bar. All right, maybe I should show you guys the other aesthetic piece I chose for this frame. Well, this build, but again, I bought this and the chrome bars together to go in a different color, but I also bought, this is from Kinetic too, the Tidal, I guess it's like a brown leather with like a black, kind of like a dirty look to it. Then I'll have silver pedals, black wheels. Yeah, I'm unsure about this seat now, and I'm unsure about the bars. I guess I'll just put them on anyway, and we'll see how that looks. I am actually fired up to have a downhill bike again, because, well, we've got the new Grouse bike park here in Vancouver. Sick to have a local bike park, especially here in like a big city. Apparently, I think maybe there's more bike parks coming. Of course, Whistler and Coast Gravity also very close, Silver Star and all that kind of stuff. But we've also got like some shuttle zones right here on the North Shore. Cypress in Seymour. And yeah, it's nice to ride a big bike on some of that stuff. You know, I did my video of riding my hardtail in Whistler, and I'll say I was just curious to what it would actually be like to ride a hardtail in Whistler, and totally more or less fine. But at the end of the day, like, if I'm choosing a bike to have the most fun on in a bike park, yeah, it's going to be a downhill bike. If you haven't had a chance to ride a downhill bike, yeah, I would just rent one and try it out. I don't think I've ever heard of anyone trying a downhill bike, especially at a bike park, and being like, you know, I just really prefer 12 speeds and less travel. It's just a downhill bike is, yeah, they're sick. Now, if you were not an idiot, which way would you put this on? It's also very hot out, and my camera keeps overheating. So I think we're gonna end up shutting off here in 1 second. And yeah, we might blip into the future because my camera needs to cool down. All right, I'm gonna put the wheels on. I've got some trusty Noble TR41. These are carbon wheels, and I'm using the Onyx Classic in a black. The Onyx Classic hubs, the reason I like them so much, they are very reliable, but also, you gotta listen to this. Hold it up to my microphone. Maybe you can just sort of barely hear something there. Anyways, they're silent hubs. So I'm gonna try and build up a very silent bike with no clickety clack. And these Noble TR41s, you've probably seen that run the 37s usually. The major difference between the two is the inner sort of width right here. The 37s are 30 mil, and I think these are 35 mil. And what that does is just, so you can imagine just taking your tire and imagine squishing the beads right together. You have a very round tire, and sort of the wider you make that go, the flatter the tire gets. And so yeah, these just have a wider sort of profile here so that the tire is a little flatter, not as round. And yeah, just nice for downhill bikes and DH bikes and things like that. So went with the TR41s. Now, of course, Noble Wheels is a sponsor of the channel, and because of that, there's a link and a code down in the description. If you are thinking about grabbing a set, there's a discount down there if you, yeah, if you want to grab some wheels. And if you do use that code, it helps the channel, lets them know that, yeah, you saw Noble Wheels here. Gonna do Cushcore front and rear. These are old used Cushcore, but I think they're still good. As you can see, I like to run low pressure and romp through rocky sections. So I just like that for just the extra peace of mind. And I'm gonna run the DH casing Assegai in a max grip. I think a lot of people don't realize that the max grip actually makes quite a big difference compared to the Max Terra compound. I've seen people running, you know, Max Terra or, you know, whatever Continental calls their sort of Max Terra equivalent, like the Trail compound or whatever. It does last longer, but at not being grippy. So a lot of people come here to the P&W and they've got, say, a Max Terra front tire, even an Assegai or a DHF, and they're like, man, this grip's not great. You switch to a Max Grip front tire and yeah, makes a big difference. So anyways, running Assegai DH casing, Max Grip. I'm not gonna make you guys suffer watching me install the tires, so I'll just, through the magic of video editing, now I need to actually do it myself, but okay, I'm gonna go put these on and we'll toss them on the bike, and yeah, we'll get a pretty good idea what this thing's gonna look like. All right, got the rear tire on. Also got the 7-speed cassette on. The other nice thing about used Cushcore is it's a little bit looser, so this wasn't too bad to put on. Got the sealant in there. Maybe I'll toss the rotor on right now. Lewis sent me these rotors to try. They are 2.3 mil thick. This one is a 200, and I've got a 220 for the front. And yeah, I think it looks pretty cool, so give them a go. All right, I've got the rear tire on, got the rear wheel on, disc, rotor, cassette. Rear end is just about done. Just gotta do the front now. Again, another carbon Noble TR41, Cushcore, Max Grip Assegai, DH casing. Again, not gonna make you guys suffer and watch me try and do this. So, boop boop. All right, there. We've got the front wheel on, rotors on, tires on, Cushcore installed, sealant in even, tires seated. Bike is, I mean, it looks like a bike now. I actually do think the chrome and leather he is looking pretty good. Again, maybe I'm just biased because it's my own bike I'm building, but I think it's all coming together. Maybe we'll toss on the pedals now. For this, I got the classic Chromag Dagas. Very bright in the sun here, kind of hard to see, but yeah, silver. Still remember having Primo power bites on my BMX, and if you remember those cranks, they were insane. They are very chonky, but they also had some weird mismatched metal thing where they had a sleeve where the pedal goes, and what would end up happening is so many times you would put in your pedal, ride for a season, and then you'd realize that yeah, you are never taking that pedal out of the crank again. They would just become fused. Probably can't see me on the other side here, but as a lot of you probably know, pedals are threaded differently depending on which side you're on. And so the way that I always remember which way is tighten is if you're basically holding the threads against each other and you go to pedal backwards and you're holding everything, that's the way you twist to tighten. In theory, I could go ride this around right now, because all I need to do is run the derailleur cable and housing and the brakes in the chain, then grips and shifter. But I think that's it. This bike will be done. All right, it is coming along. Just going to route the rear shifter housing through the frame. Then I'll do the same for the rear brake. That's the most probably annoying part I've got to do. Well, actually, no, there's one other annoying part we'll get to in a second, but this is probably one of the more annoying parts, is doing all the frame wiring. All right, housing done. Could maybe run the rear brake line through. So I've got the Hope Tech V4, so let's just grab one. Now I don't mind dot fluid once the fluid is in the brakes and on the bike and everything, but yeah, I'm not a big fan of working on dot fluid brakes. Just seems you gotta be more careful, wear goggles and glasses, and you know, make sure your bike's all cleaned down so it doesn't eat through the paint and all that. But yeah, so these are dot fluid, and also have a very thick hose. So I'm actually wondering if I even have something to cut the hose with. So yeah, bleeding these brakes is kind of annoying. Yeah, it's a very odd process, especially for such a mature product, especially such a popular and mature product. Anyways, so I might end up either getting the shop to put them on, or at least to bleed them, just because you're going to be spilling dot fluid everywhere. You have to. Yeah, it's easier to do in a shop with a shop floor, easier to clean up. All right, so I realized that this bike, when it comes stock, it comes with, you know, the SRAM stuff that's all integrated, and you know, it all fits onto the bar. But the Hope brakes that I have to put on this bike don't have whatever this is called, so I need to go to the shop again and find a little clamp for this. Maybe I'll finish putting everything else on the bike, then I can go to the shop and find a little clamp, maybe get them just to bleed the brakes, then we'll be done. All right, I've got the Hope brakes here. Well, let's take a quick look. So yeah, I've got the Hope brakes, red accent, silver. Never tried these brakes before, and I'll do a full review and whatnot when I get some time on them, but I am excited to try them. The only thing is, it's a bit of a faff to put these on right now. Initial impressions are that they are very nicely machined. The one-piece big caliper looks cool. I'm actually interested in that new brake they've got coming out in September, the GR4, I want to say it's called, which will be, I guess, replacing this brake, which is the Tech V4. I think this new brake that they have coming out is supposed to be a little stronger. It's got an easier bleed process. Did I hear it was mineral oil now too, maybe? I don't remember. But it just seems like some solid improvements. Oh, and there's a bunch of different lever blades you can get to adjust the brake feel, which is interesting. I can put on the front brake, except the bolts that come to mount the caliper are too short to go through the caliper and the 20 mil post mount. So I need to go find longer bolts as well. So a bit of a standstill stuff I want to do here. Put on the chain, I guess. But brakes, shifter, chain. That's it. All right, I'm just swapping the good pads that I actually want to use with the organic pads, which I'll never use, because when you bleed the brakes, oil goes everywhere. One of the weird things I'm noticing is, yeah, there was dot fluid on the lever when I opened it up. It also seems like there's a bit of dot fluid already on the back of these pads, which is, I think that's what that is. And if it is, that is somewhat concerning. Every brake I've tried with like the organic pads, DRP, SRAM, you know, the Mavens, Hayes. The initial bite of the brake is a little better. I just don't really see the point to organic pads. They also wear down so fast, especially if you ride them in the wet here. You get like a few rides out of organic pads. They seem to just disintegrate when they get wet. They're quiet though, I'll give them that. Organic pads, you don't get that loud honking noise. All right, I've run into a decent amount of small problems. Much like Hayes, Hope doesn't fit. Let's focus here. Hope doesn't fit these SRAM brake mount adapters. Like comes too deep here, just like the Hayes calipers. So yeah, I think the NSB, the North Shore billet ones work. They have those at Kinetic, luckily. I can go grab one. But still, kind of annoying. All right, let's do something easy. Been a big fan of these grips recently. These are the Chester, specifically in the XL. Yeah, tried them at the shop one day, and yeah, realized they feel quite nice. So I've got these on all my other bikes, just about. I'm gonna put them on every bike. Don't have them on the Fugitive right now, but I think I'll go buy another set. Get the bike like 90% done and bring it to the shop, because I think I'm just gonna end up getting them to do the brakes, because yeah, thankfully the new Hopes, much better bleed process. These Hopes, just horrendous bleed process. And yeah, I don't want to do that. I've drawn the line at horrendous bleed process and just dot fluid all over my patio. All right, I've got the bike back from Kinetic. Brakes are on and cut and bled. Everything is all built together. I have to do an overall bolt check, maybe roll my bars, set the fork suspension, all that kind of stuff. But it's done. I think it turned out quite sick. Let me know what you think about the chrome bars. Let me know what you think about the bike. I'm very stoked to go ride a downhill bike. I think it's been about 4 years. But that's it for today's video. The next video about this bike will be a bike check, and then the video after that, we'll go for a ride. Hope you guys will check those out. Thanks for watching. See you guys in the next one.